Thousands of you left a comment on the last video with the same request. You wrote, "Tell us more about this stove." So I went back to Holmes County, Ohio, where there is a stove that hasn't been fired since morning. It burned for 1 hour, 2 small logs burned to the ground, and the fire went out. But the house will be warm until tomorrow morning, and no one will touch this stove again. I know this because I put my hand to the wall of the stove at 10 o'clock at night, 6 hours after the fire died. She was warm, not scalding hot, but warm like a human body. The family inside didn't pay $1 to the utility company for heating. When I asked the man who built the stove how much it cost, he said $50. And then he told me something I wasn't ready for. He told me that the reason you have never seen a stove like this is not because it doesn't work. The reason is that it works too well. In 37 states, its construction is prohibited by law. That's exactly what this video is about. A heating system that costs $50 burns 90% less wood than a regular stove in your home and radiates heat for up to 24 hours from a single fire that burns for less than 90 minutes. The Amish did not invent this system, they inherited it. Their ancestors brought it from Germany more than 200 years ago and never stopped using it, even after the rest of America forgot about its existence. The first time I walked into one of these houses near Millersburg, I spent 20 minutes searching for the thermostat. There was no thermostat, no furnace, and no air ducts. In the center of the house stood a large, warm structure, more like a bench than a stove. Every room in that house had the same temperature. It's not hot by the fire and cold by the window, but the same everywhere. I have never experienced such a feeling in my life. But the most interesting thing began when I delved into the history of this system and discovered something that left me dumbfounded. Mark Twain, yes, that Mark Twain, wrote about this stove in 1878 after traveling through Germany. He called it the best stove ever invented. Twain wrote that one firebox lasts all day, the cost is practically zero, and the heat remains the same all day instead of being either too hot or too cold. That was 147 years ago, and most Americans had still never heard of it. Before I explain how this system works and exactly how you can build it, including if you already have a home, I need to tell you what it replaces. Because the only way to understand why this system is important is to understand how poorly the device sitting in your basement right now is serving you. The typical wood stove you probably grew up with burns at about 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit inside the firebox. This sounds impressive until you realize what happens next. At 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, wood does not burn completely. Smoke, gases, and volatile compounds go into the chimney at a temperature of 400 to 600 degrees. Every time you look outside and see smoke coming out of a chimney, you are watching heat leave your home. You watch the money fly into the sky. The number printed on the box indicates 75% efficiency. This is a laboratory figure. In a real house with real firewood, opened and closed by a real person, the actual efficiency is closer to 35%. This means that 65% of the heat that the firewood could provide you goes straight up the chimney. And that's not the worst part. Incomplete combustion creates creosote, a tarry deposit inside the chimney that causes house fires. Thus, you lose most of the heat, and at the same time create a fire hazard. Now I want you to imagine the picture. You are standing next to your wood stove in January. You put logs in it every 2 hours from dinner. The house is warm near the stove and cold in the bedroom. A column of white and gray smoke emerges from the chimney, which can be seen from the road. And you think that this is how it works, that this is exactly what heating a house with wood looks like. But that's not true. This is what wasting wood looks like, and the Amish knew a better way 300 years ago. Their stove operates on the exact opposite principle of everything you've been taught about burning wood. Instead of a slow, continuous burn, you burn intensely and quickly. The combustion chamber is shaped like the letter J or L. The fire enters horizontally through the feed tube. You place small sticks sideways rather than stacking them. The wood passes through a horizontal combustion tunnel, and then the hot gases rise through an insulated vertical tube called a heat riser. Inside this tube, the temperature reaches 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. At 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit, something remarkable happens. The smoke itself ignites. Gases that would escape through a conventional chimney burn completely. What comes out the other end is not black smoke, but water vapor and carbon dioxide. The temperature of the exhaust leaving this system is between 90 and 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Compare that to 400 or 600 degrees Fahrenheit from your regular furnace. All this difference from 300 to 500 degrees Fahrenheit is the heat that remained inside the house instead of escaping through the roof. But that's only half the story. In a conventional furnace, any heat that remains in the house is radiated out of the metal box. The metal heats up quickly and cools down quickly. The moment the fire dies, the heat begins to disappear. This system does something completely different. Hot gases from the combustion chamber do not go straight out. They run horizontally through a solid bench made of brick, stone, or adobe mixture of clay, sand, and straw. This bench absorbs heat before it can escape, and then slowly releases it over the next 12 to 24 hours, like a battery, a thermal battery. The surface of this bench is never dangerously hot. Children sit on it, animals sleep next to it. It is warm, like a sunlit stone wall on an autumn day. Convenient, permanent, safe. The Amish families I have visited use the bench as furniture. The children do their homework on it after school, and Grandma reads there in the evenings. One man told me he hadn't turned on the heater or plugged in the electric blanket in 17 years. He said, "Why do I need this? The bench is warm when I wake up, warm when I go to bed, warm between these moments." And that's what made me feel like a fool. The wood you burn in this system is not the thick split logs you're used to hauling out of the woodpile. These are sticks, thin, dry, hard rocks about the thickness of your thumb. Fallen branches, garden trimmings, wood scraps from the workshop. You light them with a match and newspaper. Within 2 or 3 minutes, the thermal riser gets so hot it creates what builders call the rocket effect, a roaring thrust that sounds like a miniature jet engine. You feed it wood for 45 or 90 minutes, then stop. The fire goes out on its own. And for the next 12 to 24 hours, the bench radiates heat to every corner of the room. Now let me give you the numbers, because numbers separate a good story from a decision you can actually make. Ianto Evans, a Welsh builder living in Cove, Oregon, who documented and popularized the modern version of the system through his work at the Retrofitting Research Center, reported surprising results. He went from burning 4 or 5 cords of wood per winter with a conventional stove to about 2/3 a cord with a rocket mass stove. Same house, same climate, same area. This is an 80 or 90% reduction in fuel. To get an idea of scale, a cord of firewood is a stack 4 feet wide, 4 feet high, and 8 feet long. He went from having to have a woodpile the size of a truck to one that fits in a wheelbarrow. Other builders across the country are reporting similar results. Some homeowners in temperate climates say they heat their entire home with fallen branches from their yard. No chainsaw, no chopping wood, no buying wood, just picking up sticks like your grandfather collected kindling when he was 8 years old. The average American family spends between $1,400 and $2,400 a year on heating over the course of a 30-year mortgage. Over 30 years, that's from $42,000 to $72,000 just to keep the house warm. The system I am describing costs between $50 and $100 in materials. A steel barrel, 20 or 30 fire bricks, some clay from the garden, a metal pipe for the heating riser, and fireproof mortar. That's it. A basic version can be built in a weekend. Let that sink in. $72,000 over 30 years or $50 one time. Now you may be thinking, if this works so well, why didn't anyone tell me about it? And this is where the story takes a turn that made me angry when I first heard about it. This technology is not new. The German version, called Kachelofen, has been documented for over 1,000 years. In the 15th century, the forests of Central Europe were disappearing. The timber shortage was a national crisis in Germany and Austria. A specialized profession emerged, craftsmen called Hafnermeisters, whose sole job was to build stoves capable of heating a house all day with the least amount of wood possible. Kachelofen was their masterpiece, a ceramic stove that burns low, burns hot, burns completely, and then radiates heat all day long. These craftsmen were paid like architects. Their furnaces were considered national treasures, and the basic principle behind them, that stone retains heat and metal dissipates it, goes back even further. Archaeologists have found antecedents in the Bronze Age Alps some 2,500 years before Christ. A fire surrounded by stones, the stones absorb heat. The heat radiates long after the fire has gone out. 4,500 years of proven technology. And this was not only in Europe. The Chinese developed the Kong, a raised stone sleeping platform heated by a fire channel underneath, which kept families warm throughout the night. Koreans built ondol, radiant floor heating through stone channels, more than 2,000 years ago. The Romans used hypocaust, the same principle of channeling hot air under stone floors to heat entire buildings. On every continent, independently, for thousands of years, people came to the same conclusion. Stone retains heat, metal wastes it. A chimney that releases hot air outside is not a feature, it is a design flaw. And yet here in America, we still build houses with metal ducts and chimneys that vent heat into the sky. The Ohio and Pennsylvania Amish are of German-Swiss descent. When they immigrated in the 18th and 19th centuries, they brought Kakelofen with them. And here's the critical difference: they never gave it up. When the rest of America switched to forced air central heating in the 1950s, the Amish continued to build stone stoves. They didn't switch because the old way was better. They knew it, their grandparents knew it, their great-grandparents knew it. But the rest of America has forgotten, and this oblivion was not an accident. In 1950, central heating system manufacturers launched the forced air furnace as a symbol of modern American life. Magazine ads showed smiling families in front of chrome vents. The message was clear. If you still had a stone stove in your home, you were behind. You were old-fashioned. You were poor. The old ways, stone ovens, radiant heat, thermal mass were labeled as primitive, obsolete, what your immigrant grandfather used because he didn't know any better. And it worked. In one generation, an entire country abandoned a heating method that had worked for 1,000 years and replaced it with a system that requires monthly payments until the day you die. The American heating industry today generates more than $30 billion in annual revenue. Every home built with forced air heating is a customer for life. Buying fuel, replacing filters, maintaining equipment, paying monthly bills that never stop. A house with a stone stove is a client who may never need anything again. This is not the client the industry wants. This is the client the industry needs to prevent. Now here's the part that should get your blood boiling. The current version of this system, the rocket mass furnace, has never been certified by the Environmental Protection Agency, not because it failed emissions tests. It was never certified because the agency only certifies products that are manufactured in the plant. Same unit after identical unit. The rocket mass furnace is built on site. Each one is unique. Each one is custom made. No factory, no assembly line, no product to certify. And here is the number that tells you everything. A well-built rocket mass furnace produces about 0.12 grams of fine particles per hour. The EPA limit for a certified wood stove is 2.5 grams per hour. The rocket mass furnace is 20 times cleaner than what the agency allows as a maximum for certified furnaces. And it is banned not because of what comes out of it, but because of the sticker that is not on it. In 37 states, installing a rocket mass stove in your home requires that you own at least 20 contiguous acres of land. This is not a federal law. It is a standard that hundreds of counties have adopted into their local fire codes. The average American doesn't own 20 acres. The average American lives on a quarter acre in the suburbs. An Amish farmer in Holmes County, Ohio, sitting on 100 acres, can build any stove he wants. The American homeowner in Columbus, 75 miles down the road, cannot. Same state, same air, same physics, different rules. And these rules have nothing to do with security. They have to do with who writes the code. In 2022, a couple in Jackson County, Oregon, built a rocket mass furnace in their home on 18.7 acres. They did everything right and hired an independent lab to test the emissions. The results came back at 0.12 hundredths of a gram per hour, 20 times below the agency limit, cleaner than a pellet stove, cleaner than a gas stove by some measurements. The county inspector ordered them to tear it down anyway. The hearing officer's decision was that compliance was determined by listing status, not emissions measurements. It didn't matter how clean the oven was. It didn't matter that the test results were better than anything on the market. The oven did not have the required paper, so it had to be removed. They tore it down for $4,200. They were forced to install an agency-certified furnace for $9,800 that pollutes more than what they had. Think about it. They spent $14,000 to replace a cleaner system with a dirtier one because the cleaner one didn't have a piece of paper. Now, if you already own a home and think this only applies to people building from scratch, stay with me, because this next part is especially for you. I hear it every time. I live in a house built in 1972. I have a basement. I have existing ductwork. What should I do? Rip out the walls? No, you are not tearing anything. There are 3 ways to bring this technology into a home you already own. The first option is an extension. Build a rocket mass furnace in a shed, garage, or workshop adjacent to your home. Use the heat it generates to heat water or air and channel that heat into your main living space. In most jurisdictions, additions have codes that are less restrictive than the home itself. You're not modifying your home, you're heating a shed that happens to share a wall with your kitchen. I know a man in rural Tennessee who heats his entire 1,500-square-foot home this way. The kiln is located in his workshop, 12 feet from the back door. A simple water loop transfers heat inside. His winter heating bill last year was 0. His workshop is also warm, he calls it his 2-in-1. The second option is a traditional stone oven, Kahalofen style without the rocket element. They are exempt from agency certification in most states if they weigh more than 1,800 pounds. This is a mass exception recorded in the Federal Register in 2014. If the appliance is heavy enough, the agency considers it a masonry stove rather than a wood stove, and the certification requirements do not apply. A traditional masonry stove installed by a professional costs between $3,000 and $8,000. Compare that to $42,000 in heating bills over 30 years, and the math isn't even close. You'll pay for it in 2 winters and then never write a check for heat again. The third option, and I want to be clear, this is not legal advice. It is something that thousands of people across the country are already doing quietly. In rural areas without frequent code enforcement, many homeowners build rocket mass stoves in their garage or basement without asking permission. The emissions are so low that there is virtually nothing to detect. No visible smoke, no smell, no complaints from neighbors because there is nothing to complain about. I've read hundreds of posts on permaculture forums from people in 30 different states who have been heating this way for 5, 10, 15 years. They are not hiding. They have simply stopped asking permission to do what their great-grandfathers did without thinking. Now, before I get to the most important part of this video, the part that I spent weeks tracking down, I want to mention something. After the last video, hundreds of you asked where they could find all these Amish techniques in one place. That's why I put together a complete guide. It's called the Amish Home System. How to cut every utility bill to 0 using methods that were legal before 1950. Step-by-step instructions for any pre-built home. No permits, no contractors, no new construction required. Link in the description below this video. Now for the technique I saved for last. I found this by digging through the test records of the Retrofitting Research Center in Oregon, the same institute where Ianto Evans developed the original rocket stove in the 1970s. Most people who build a rocket mass oven make a bench, thermal mass out of adobe mixture or standard brick. It works well. But what Retrofitting's data showed, and what almost no one talks about, is that the geometry of the internal channels matters more than the material. That's what I mean. Most builders run one straight pipe through the bench. Hot gases travel in a straight line, give off some heat, and escape outward. Simple, effective. But Aprovecho tested a configuration where the internal chimney makes 2 complete turns inside the bench, like a snake going back and forth. The gases travel 3 times the distance before reaching the exhaust. The outlet temperature dropped from 90 degrees to barely above ambient temperature, meaning nearly 100% of the available heat was captured by the mass. The difference was not a slight improvement. It was the difference between a bench that stays warm for 12 hours and one that stays warm for 24 hours. And the change costs nothing, $0 extra. You use the same pipe, the same materials, you just route it differently inside the bench. The total additional labor costs may be 2 hours. You make 2 extra bends, add 2 extra feet of horizontal travel, and double the storage time of your thermal battery. This is the kind of detail that separates a good system from a great one. And this is the kind of detail that never appears in the quick tutorial videos that people churn out online. This is the same principle that the Finns have used in their counterflow stone ovens for centuries. The smoke path meanders back and forth through the masonry, releasing heat at every turn. The Amish Kahalofin uses a similar approach, internal baffles that force gases to pass through a labyrinth before they are released. What Aprovecho proved is that you can apply the same logic to a $50 rocket mass oven built from garden clay and a salvaged barrel. Nobody needs to spend $10,000 on a ready-made mason. The physics are the same. Channel the gases, extend the journey, capture the heat. The Amish man I visited in Holmes County, the one who built his furnace for $50, he already knew that. He didn't read Aprovecho's data. He didn't need to. His grandfather taught him, and his grandfather's grandfather brought this knowledge from Germany 200 years ago. The research center simply confirmed what his family had known for generations, and this is the part that keeps me up at night. This knowledge exists. It has always existed. It survived the Industrial Revolution. It survived the marketing campaigns of the 1950s. It survived because several communities, the Amish, the permaculture builders, the people living quietly off the grid in Oregon, Vermont, and Montana, refused to let it die. They continued to build. They continued to teach. They continued to heat their homes for nothing. And the rest of us wrote checks to utility companies every month and thought it was normal. It was never okay. It was a choice that someone else made for us. And it was a lucrative choice for them. Mark Twain saw one of these stoves in 1878 and called it the best and most economical stove ever invented. He wrote that the Americans could accept it, but they won't. He said, "We stick to our own terrible inventions, none of which are rational." That was 147 years ago, and he was right. We didn't accept it. We were told not to do it. They sold us something worse and made us pay for it every month for the rest of our lives. The Amish never bought what was sold to them and never paid the bill. You don't need 20 acres. You don't need a permit. You don't need a contractor. You need a weekend, $50 for materials, and a willingness to do something that your great-grandfather thought was common sense. A barrel, a few bricks, clay from the yard, and the decision that from now on you are done paying someone else for what the earth gives for free. Every home in America that has a furnace running is a home that has forgotten something. This video is about how to remember. Leave your staff in the comments and tell me how you heat your home now and how much you pay. I want to build a map of what this system could save in every state in the country. And if your grandfather or father ever built something like this, I want to hear about it. Because this knowledge did not disappear, it simply died down. And it's time to turn up the volume again. If you believe that real knowledge was quietly pushed aside to protect someone else's profit, you already know what to do next. Click subscribe because the next video is about something I found in a 1938 Department of Agriculture manual that was removed from public libraries in 1954. And what's in that manual could cut your water bill to zero, the same way that furnace cuts your heating bill. See you there. Part 21. Complete.